All right, the next question is to solve this equation and be sure you show your work. Remember, for every problem in the exam, to show as much work as possible. It allows me to give partial credit if you make a tiny mathematical error, like 2 plus 3 is 6, or it allows me to see where you might have went wrong, and if you did that correctly on another problem, I know that you really do know the concept, but maybe aren't as sure with yourself. So, first thing I want to do is solve this equation. I have 3x plus 1 divided by x minus 5, and we're going to equals 4. And we're going to want to solve this for x. So my first step is going to be to add 5 to both sides. That gives me 3x plus 1 divided by x equals 4 plus 5, which is 9. Now what I'm going to need to do is go ahead and get the x out of the denominator. So I'm going to need to multiply both sides of my equation by x. Remember what we do to one side of an equation? We need to do the other side of an equation. That gives me 3x plus 1, because my x's cancel out, equals 9x. Next, I want to subtract 3x from both sides. Remember, we want to combine like terms, get x by itself. So I have 1 equals 6x. I divide both sides by 6. I get 1x is 6th. Our next problem is a linear inequality. So what I want you to do is write your answer as an inequality and as an interval, and then graph it and make sure you show your work. So let's go ahead and work with this 3-part inequality. Again, I'm trying to isolate my variable in the middle of my inequality. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides and the middle. That gives me negative 1 is less than negative x over 4 is less than 7. Now, I have negative x over 4. So I'm going to want to multiply everything by negative 4x. That'll leave me with just an x in the middle. Now remember, when I'm multiplying by a negative, I have to flip my signs. So I have 4 is greater than x, which is greater than negative 28. And this makes sense, right? Negative 28 is less than x, which is less than 4. It wouldn't have made sense if we hadn't switched our signs, because we would have ultimately that 4 is less than negative 28. We don't want that. So I'm going to write my solution set in an interval and as an inequality. So here it is as an inequality. Our work's already done for us. I'm going to go ahead and graph my solution set so that you can see where my interval would come from. Okay, so here's my beautiful number line. I'm going to go ahead and graph it. I have that 4, my negative 28 is less than x, but it's not less than or equal to an open dot, and every number makes this a true inequality until I get to 4, which is also an open dot. So as an interval, part B, this is C right here, we would have the numbers from negative 28 all the way up until 4. And the reason this is our solution set is because every number in between negative 28 and 4 makes this inequality a true statement. Next, I want us to find the center and radius of this circle. Sorry, I was startled, guys. My door flew open because of the wind. Okay, so find the center and radius of this circle. Remember, we have the equation for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals our radius squared. So in order to do this, I'm going to want to move my constant to the other side of my equation, and then I'm going to have to use the completing the square formula twice. So I have x squared minus 6x plus y squared plus 8y equals a positive 10. Now remember, to complete the square, we add b over 2 squared to both sides of our equation, and then it'll factor perfectly to x minus b over 2. I'm sorry, I mean x plus b over 2 squared. Okay, so I have two b's in this case. I have -6 and 8. So I'm going to go ahead and add -6 divided by 2 squared to both sides and 8 divided by 2 squared to both sides. That means I have -6 divided by 2, which is -3 squared is 9. And y squared plus 8y. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. I know these are going to factor into perfect squares. I'm going to have x minus 3 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 10 plus 9 plus 16 is 35. So my center is going to be HK, and my radius is going to be the square root of r squared. So my center, because both of these have to be negative, remember, my center is 3, -4, and my radius is the square root of 35. And I got that because r squared equals 35, and if I just want to know what r is, I need to take the square root of both sides because square roots cancel out squares. Next, I want to use this piecewise function to answer the questions below. So, remember, a piecewise function breaks our domain into chunks. I have my domain where x is less than 0, x is equal to 0, and x is greater than 0. So, if I want to know what f of -4 is, I have to figure out which of these three equations is defined for -4. Well, -4 is less than 0, so it's going to be 2x. So I have f of -4 is 2 times -4, which is -8. Now, what's the function for when f is 2? Well, 2 is when x is greater than 0. So I'm going to have f of 2 is substituted into this equation. 2 squared plus 2, that gives me 6. Last but not least, I want to know when f is 0. Well, x is equal to 0 right here. So f of 0 is just going to be 1, right? It's a constant function. I want you to go ahead and graph the following equation and state the domain and range. Remember, we're dividing our domain up into 3 chunks. I have when x is less than 0, when x equals 0, or when x is greater than 0. So let's go ahead and graph 2x. That graph is going to look like what? What's the degree-one equations graph look like? It looks like a line, right? My y-intercept is 0, cool, and my slope is 2. So I have an open dot at 0 because this function is not defined for 0. And my slope is 2, that means I go up 2 over 1. But I'm going to do the opposite because it's only defined on this half over here. So I'm going to go down 2 over 1 quite a few times, right? This is a line with a slope of 2 and a y-intercept of 0. Next, I have when x equals 0, so right here, y equals 1. So I have 1 point. When x is 0, y is 1. And it's a closed dot because it's an equal sign. For the next equation, I'm going to use green. I've got a parabola, right? X squared plus 2, that's a parabola that's shifted up 2, right? Because when x is 0, we would have y is 2. But I made a mistake there, and what was it? I put a closed dot. Because it's less than, we need an open dot. And I could find a couple more points. Beautiful. So what's my domain? Well, this equation is defined for every single value of x. So my domain goes from -infinity to +infinity. It's my range that's been affected. Remember, range is our possible y values. So I go from negative infinity all the way up to 0, but 0 is not included. Then I have 1, just 1 all by itself. And then I have 2, but 2 is not included, all the way up to positive infinity. So that's how we would write our domain and range in interval form.